Greetings, Mr. Vale, and welcome to the final project of the 1992 school season. Our final project, as you know, is a conversation with an adult. I picked my parents. First, my father, Jerry Walsh, and my mother, Carol Walsh. The topics we'll be discussing will be the time frame from 1960 to 1992. So let's jump right into the questions and enjoy. The 60s here. Tell us where you were when you heard about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
I was in gym class, and we were practicing marching. Our gym teacher decided that this would be an appropriate time to have all the boys start to march to get ready for war. So, in gym class, we were...
What was your viewpoint on this whole crisis or deal here? Did you actually think we were going to war at that time? We have a doorbell. I get it. Sit tight.
I can remember watching it on TV. I was very far. I wasn't. I really didn't.
We're paying attention, and we're on TV.
That's Ben probably putting this.
Well, I have my finger
Where on the end?
underneath the nail.
No, it just looks like you cut it down so well that it's rubbing the skin. I don't really know.
The floor's going to have to be repaired, right?
It was like that.
Hey, all right. How you doing?
Hurry up.
Is your Benji?
Yes, we did.
Did you? He said hi. All right. So, what was my question?
Cuban Missile Crisis.
And Dad was marching in gym class.
All right. So, what did you actually think of this? Did you actually think we were going to war at this point, or what?
Me?
You.
I just remember, basically I remember seeing this on television. It was like far removed from Frankfort, New York, where I grew up. And, you know, we weren't that involved in things. It's not like today where you people are, you know, in current events or that sort of thing. It just was something that was on television. And I remember I liked John F. Kennedy because I liked, you know, very forceful the way he handled it. But other than that, I really don't, you know, I can't say too much about it.
I can remember, yes, we thought we were going to be going to war because this is the first time that we ever really knew anything about missiles. And being 90 miles off the shore, nobody really knew where Cuba was at the moment, or at that time. But when they said it was only 90 miles off our shore and there was a threat that it would only be a matter of a minute or two before this missile was to hit anywhere in the USA, then everybody was concerned.
All right, you mentioned John F. Kennedy. What did you actually think of that election that year? Would you have voted for Kennedy if you were eligible to vote?
Oh, probably.
Why?
He was young. He was different. He was a Roman Catholic, and that was like a real big thing. We're Irish Roman Catholic, you know that, and that meant a lot to my parents. Because to have my father, who was born in Ireland, to have someone of his heritage to be able to take over the office, he could be horrible, but as long as he was Irish, I think Grandpa would have voted for him. And you know, you reflect a lot of your parents' viewpoints. That was a time when things were really kind of very dull in America as far as government. And he was young, he was energetic, he has a beautiful wife, young children, and you know, it was a time for a change. So yes, probably. It was a romantic kind of thing.
Would you have voted for him?
Definitely, definitely.
Why?
Well, he seemed to know what he was talking about. At the time when they had the debate with Hume, who was it?
Nixon.
Nixon. With Nixon, he made mincemeat out of Nixon, and
He's a very good speaker.
yeah, he was a good speaker.
Okay.
So.
And what did you think of when he was assassinated? The viewpoint of the whole area that you were around, your friends and your parents and their parents.
Oh, we were all devastated. I mean, the church bells rang in school. We were all let out. We didn't go back to school, until he was
Where were you when he was assassinated?
in school. I was in Latin class with
And
Miss
how did they
Ingram.
go about breaking that?
It was an announcement on the loudspeaker, and they said that school will now be dismissed. The President of the United States has been shot and very possibly killed, and we would like everyone to go back to their homes. It's a state of emergency. It was declared a national emergency, actually, but it was a state of emergency in New York State, too. And they just closed everything down. And this was all televised, and that's the thing. We are just in the era where television became such an important communication vehicle, where 10 years previous to that, there were very few TVs. There were no color TVs. I mean, it was just phenomenal kind of thing. And to watch this whole thing on TV, and then to see not only the repeat of the footage of he being killed, but then his supposed assassin being killed.
What did you think about that? Do you actually think that he shot him, or don't you think so?
Oh no, I think it's a much deeper plot than that.
Do you think that?
Of course, I didn't get to see JFK like some of us did, so I'm not really sure what.
It's coming out on video already.
Oh, then we'll get it here. But I'm sure it had more to do with that. But we'll never know. I don't think we'll ever know.
Do you think that that investigation, that the Supreme Court did? Do you actually think that could have gone further? A lot of people think that they didn't interview key witnesses. A lot of people feel that it was a government cover-up. It was actually it was Lyndon Johnson's home state, and they actually thought that he wanted to become president, and they didn't think he would be elected president after Kennedy. And he and Kennedy did not get along. Do you think that Johnson had something to do with the conspiracy there?
I don't know if Johnson per se, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if the political machine behind him didn't have something to do with it. But I'm talking a lot, so you can take over.
Well, I don't know. It's been a long time, and who knows? You forget different things. But like the movie pointed out, different things that they felt. That Johnson was behind different things, and the Army wanted to have this war in Vietnam and what have you, and Kennedy definitely wanted to get out of Vietnam. So, who's to say? It was a terrible thing.
You don't like to believe that your government or parts of your government would be behind something like that. And I guess our generation doesn't want to believe that. I don't know. I think your generation is much more critical and always questioning. We were more than our parents, but you people are even more so.
Well, we were always kind of taught to believe that we were protected by our government.
Yeah.
So whatever they chose not to tell us was probably good for the
good.
country. It would just cause too much of a commotion for its own good.
So let's jump ahead about 3 or 4 months now. Johnson is the president, and we do go into what is called the Korean conflict. Your thoughts going into war here, close to the draft, is you could have been drafted for that. Tell us about that whole time period there.
You're talking about the
Korean or Vietnam?
Vietnam conflict. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Vietnam conflict touched probably every town in the nation, because there was always someone that was wounded or killed, because there was about 50, 60,000 men that lost their lives. But I don't know the number that were wounded. But usually, every town, everybody had someone that was there, so that everybody was touched by whatever happened there, and it was from what all reports, everything was so poorly run that we weren't really there to win. We were just there to show them that we were there to fight. And I don't think we were there to win.
To
But as far
preserve
as
democracy, that was what they said, to preserve democracy.
and we weren't really welcome there. Most of the people that I spoke to, they just they weren't welcome there. We didn't feel as if we were welcome. They didn't want us there. So why were we there? That was the big question during the '60s. Why were we there? That's why there was a lot of protests. Nobody felt that they were happy because we were there, and we weren't happy because we were there. So why were we there?
I think, too, I know we had people from my graduating class that were killed in Vietnam. You know, you think of these kids as kids. I mean, your high school people, you more or less always think of kids, you know, remember them that way. And to think that people that you knew were out there losing their lives for you, you know, it was a very tough thing. I think we had very mixed feelings. I was in college during a lot of the protests, the big protests at Kent State and all of that business, you know, when it really started. And people, you know, some people just had a cause to have a cause. And I think some people were sincere with it. I think every generation, you know, you want to rebel against something to show that, you know, your generation is going to be different. And that was, you know, that was a big thing for us. Burning draft cards, and, you know, we had neighbors, they ended up going to a lottery system where they picked numbers, you know, it was just a random number kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if your number came up, it didn't matter whether you were in college. Before then, you could get a deferment because you were in college, you were getting a higher education and that sort of thing. But once you hit the lottery system, it didn't matter what you were doing. You went if your number came up. And my next door neighbor's number came up, and he left. And it was like, you know, then you're seeing people that really hit home and really close. My cousin went and got wounded over there. You know, now it's easy to say that it was a senseless thing, we never should have been there. But if I were one of the people that was fighting that war, I don't think I would have wanted to be told that for 2 years out of my life I was doing something senseless. So it's a very, very difficult thing. You know, you see both sides of it. You saw just a little bit with this Gulf War and how people went, you know, stood behind them, and they really wanted to let everybody know. We had yellow ribbons all over and everything. And the reason that was done was because the Vietnam vets, I think, were treated so poorly. They never wanted to do that again to anything that our military was involved in.
Okay, let's jump ahead here. It's 68. Johnson decides not to run again, and many feel he wouldn't have been reelected even if he, you know, did run. And then Martin Luther King gets shot. Your thoughts on Martin Luther King being shot?
Well, I can remember hearing about Martin Luther King being shot, and really at the time, you heard the name in the news all the time, but you really didn't know, you know, as small town USA, you really didn't know what he stood for or what, but you always heard him being arrested and what have you.
So what you're saying is, like nowadays, if Martin Luther King was around, he'd be on TV all the time, but now what you're saying, and he'd be in the newspaper, is back then that they kind of isolated him. The press stayed away from him, is what you're saying.
No, the press covered somewhat, I guess, what he did, but they didn't have the press like they do today, and we really didn't get a good idea. You know, all you would see is him being arrested. You really didn't see a lot of interviews and what his grounds were. So I personally didn't know, you know, what his beliefs were until after his death, after everything was brought out after that.
I think that you know, there was such prejudice around that this was a black man, and you know, civil rights were mistreated big time in those days, and that's what he stood for. He wanted change. He wanted things to change, but he also wanted things to change in a positive kind of way. He didn't want any of this rioting and all this stuff that many of the blacks had turned to because they were frustrated. I was in college at that time, and in Frankfort, New York, where I came from, you know, every once in a while you might have a black person who was a son or daughter of a migrant worker, and that they came from maybe, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months out of the year. And they went to our school. They were different. You know, we kind of tolerated them. We didn't do anything horrible wrong to them. But we really didn't have the contact with black people. Then I went to college, and there were lots of black people, many, many black people from the city that used to come up to upstate New York to go to college. And you learned a lot from them. You know, some of them were very militant, you know, it's our turn now, you know, you white people. And they were just as prejudiced against us because we were white as they thought we were prejudiced against them because they were black. When I started in college, it was, they were trying to make sure that blacks and whites had equal housing and equal cafeteria and the whole business and everything. So you know, they wanted them to room with the white people. They wanted everything, you know, equal. By the time I left college, the tables had turned, and the black people didn't want to room with the white people. They didn't want to have the same cafeteria. There was a cafeteria that was designated for black people only. There were floors in our dorms. There was a white, the first floor might be all white, the second floor might be all black. And it had turned the tide kind of thing. So it wasn't just that,
By their request though, right?
they were requesting it, not requesting it, they were demanding it.
Mhm.
And, there's a certain amount of prejudice because we leaned over in some respects. I can remember that these were the girls that got all the work-study jobs. Plus they would get $200 a month spending money because they were going to school by a grant.
Mhm.
And there were no jobs for any of the rest of us. Here these girls got $200 a month free from the government. I had $5 a week that I lived on in college. And, that didn't buy much. And so, that kind of thing, made you aware. We had a lot of rallies and different things where these people the black people would want to let you know about Martin Luther King. And he seemed to be a very nice man. I think I was more aware of the feelings of the blacks and that sort of thing because of the college part of it, because we had more association with the black people. But eventually, as far as his death, it was a terrible thing. And his death caused more rioting. I mean, he would have hated what happened. Because then everybody came up and then they did start rioting and they had all kinds of horrible things that were going on.
Then a few months later, Robert Kennedy was assassinated after California, and that kind of shocked the nation too.
It was a big blow to the nation.
What type of effect did that have locally here?
He was shot
In California.
California.
in June, right?
Right.
June 6th, I think it was. Wasn't it?
Well, I know by that time, a lot of the colleges had closed early because they weren't going to take any, they were afraid that there was going to be rioting on campuses and things. Now, I don't know, Kent State, is that the same year that all this happened, or was that after?
Kent State was in 68.
And this was
So
in,
It's the same year that.
all right, so that's why.
No, actually, Kent State was 1970.
So,
1970.
Was it? All right, well then then they didn't close, but we would have been closed by then.
69 or 70 it was.
We would have been, out of school by then, in June, in college. So, again, we were back home, and again, it was an isolated kind of thing. But I went home to Grandma and Grandpa, who were staunch Kennedy people. They wanted this Kennedy to be able to be, and they were very upset, about it. And I was too, because you thought there goes your last hope, and you also started to think, what kind of a country do we live in where someone has to lose two sons in a supposedly a democratic country. It was a very, very hard thing for anybody to understand. Now, unfortunately, in this day and age, when there's so many, things that happen, I don't know if it would have had that impact as it did in those days, having, first, John Kennedy, then Martin Luther King, but then the other Kennedy.
So, and then we go into that election year. Richard Nixon wins it, surprisingly. And the next 4 years, really nothing happens. We stay in Vietnam, and it comes to the '72 election, and Nixon wins by a landslide. He wins 48 of the 50 states, and then the Watergate ordeal comes up here. What are your thoughts on that once you heard the news
About Watergate?
about the Watergate scandal?
Well, just to backtrack a minute, we got out of Vietnam in between
72.
in between there, and that was a real political thing. That this was the president that was going to keep to keep on doing, like they had started a little bit before.
When his
Right.
first election, he ran against Hoover.
No,
Yeah,
was it Hoover? Oh, see.
or Humphrey. I'm sorry,
I was
Humphrey.
gonna say, okay,
Humphrey.
that I
He ran
remember.
against Humphrey, and I believe that was the year he had a secret plan to ending the war in Vietnam, and it took him 4 years to come up with his secret plan, and all it was just a simple withdrawal of troops from Vietnam, and he started withdrawing the troops from Vietnam shortly during the election year.
It's very well planned. It was a
So
political thing.
that was his thing, and that's how he won by a landslide. But as far as the Watergate incident, I personally looked at it like It was no worse than a fraternity prank that somebody ran over and got some information on this and that. But after the whole thing developed, then you found out that there was cover-ups, bribes, and what have you. But as far as looking what the other team might be, what their secret plays were or something like that, that's the way I personally looked at it. I said, so what? Everybody's always trying to find out what the other company's doing. So.
And see, Watergate was, you know, it didn't surprise me because as Nixon became president longer and longer, he really felt he was above anything happening to him. And I suppose power does that to you sometimes. I think that
Johnson did the same thing.
Yeah, you know, that you feel that I can do anything as president. You know, imagine really being the president of the United States, which is certainly a prestigious kind of thing to do and to be. That eventually you feel you probably are above the law, and you know he kind of felt he was above the law. Obviously, interesting that he would get trapped in his own means of keeping track of other people, because really what killed him were those tapes that he made. And then when he blanked out the things that were incriminating, and eventually, you know, actually that turned around and incriminated him, so he eventually had to, withdraw. But I'll never forget watching him say goodbye to everyone on TV. And again, television played a big part of this. And he got rambling on about his how he wasn't a crook, and then he started talking about his mother. And it was like he made absolutely no sense whatsoever. But then, of course, the politician in him picked himself up, and he was able to go on and continue. But there was just so much dirty politics going on in there that I think that's why we are so. Again, we've almost gone to the other side now, where anything goes with the different, like Supreme Court justice hearing and everything like that, where you're delving into everybody's past because you want to make sure you're never going to get a crook or someone who is dishonest. It's almost gone to the other side, where these, where God knows what anybody, they could uncover about anybody, but it all stems from that and that disclosure.
I mean, it was like, who would ever accuse the president of something anyhow? All you'd have to say is it was executive powers. It was like we're going back 20 years, but where we said that the government told you something. If they didn't tell you something, you would figure that it was for your own good. Now, in this case, when President Nixon chose not to tell everything that was going on about the Watergate, then everybody started demanding, say, wait a minute, now we're grown people here, we want to know what's going on. So within 20 years, that the White House, the opinion of government really has changed. And I think that's probably due to the press coverage, whether it be television, newspapers, or what have you. People are well informed now that it plays an important part. Of late, when we had our war here of Saudi Arabia,
The Gulf War.
The Gulf War. The CNN covered it, and it seemed like everybody was just watching the CNN reports all day long and into the evening, and even now when you hear that music for CNN, all you think of is the Gulf Wars, But people are more conscious of what's going on in the world because they realize it's a smaller place. It's very easy to get around with nuclear power and rockets and what have you.
Well, you can't hide anymore, where you used to be able to.
Yeah.
And the media, the television, newspapers, all of that has changed, where now you really do answer to people. And I think the generation, our generation demands more. Your generation will demand even more. Our parents were believers. They had gone through other things, and they were into really survival, because many of them were depression babies, and they were just happy to have food on the table and a job. But, our generation wants more, yours will want even more. And so we answer to people.
So in the next 6 years, Gerald Ford becomes president after Nixon leaves, and he really did nothing but fall on his face everywhere he went. And then Jimmy Carter's elected, Southern president, one that hasn't happened in a long time. And really the only thing he did was he brought the the Panama Canal together there. He finished that pact, and he met with, he started relations again with the Soviet Union. And your thoughts on the Carter administration?
I think he didn't know peanuts.
He didn't, I mean, he wasn't a memorable president, really. I think the American public was just looking for a change. They wanted a change.
More of an
And
ambassador than a president,
You know,
I think.
and-
It was just a goodwill.
But we didn't stand strong on anything, it seemed like the power was kind of gone.
Was it a big surprise when he wasn't elected in 1980? Was it a major
No.
upset?
No, not at all.
So his ratings were down where Bush's are right now, somewhere around there.
Probably, it didn't surprise me that he lost.
Now, Reagan's elected, and everyone said that he was going to be a good president. And for his first term, he did. He got the hostages out, and the first month or so, he got the hostages out, and then he basically didn't do anything wrong until 1986 with the arms scandal there with Oliver North. Your thought on the Reagan administration, one that historians believe will go down as one of the most corrupt administrations in history.
Well, I think Reagan, with his background as an actor, was definitely in his role as a politician and as a president. And sometimes I think he was playing the role. I think he had a lot of people around him that made decisions for him. I don't think he was the decision maker by any means. And where he might have been an honest man, and I don't really know because he wasn't one of my favorites, so I really wasn't involved too much in, following what he was doing. I'm not so sure that he wasn't, pretty honest. Maybe I'm wrong. But maybe he just was a type that kind of overlooked things and let other people do his dirty work.
Well, like the rich people loved him, and the poor people didn't. So I think there was more poor people than there were rich. So he had to go.
And I just think I think at this point of our government, we don't have many alternatives. We have a lot of problems, financial problems. All these presidents from years back have gotten us into debt and debt and debt. And a sad commentary is, we're no longer involved in wars, and wars really are usually when we have a good economy because we're making things and jobs are plentiful. And I don't know how much these people can do. I really don't know. I don't think there's an awful lot anybody can do because we're in such debt now that it's going to take a miracle to get us out of it.
Then Bush is elected in '88. That was not a big surprise, and his big campaign slogan was "Read my lips, no new taxes." And then a couple of years later, he says, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to change that." And now we have higher taxes. We also have a national debt rate. We're in the middle of a recession here. But he did do some things well. He got the Persian Gulf and got us out of there. But that was basically a political scheme. Do you agree with that? The political war?
Oh, I'm sure. Not much is done, in high administrations of countries without being politically backed somewhere along the line, because they have to eventually answer to the party that they're part of, and they also want to get reelected.
So. The same thing with the Panamanian conflict as well.
It's what I said before with Reagan. There's very little these presidents can do at this point. We want to change. It'll be interesting to see what kind of change. I don't know. I just think our economy is at the point now where it's going to be very difficult for anybody to get us back on our feet. But maybe it can be done. I'm not really a politician, so I don't really know how many things that can be done. But it doesn't. Bush, he doesn't really impress me as a president. I don't think I've been impressed with a president since Kennedy, to be very honest with you. And I was probably too young to realize that maybe he wasn't even good. But I was young then.
Okay, quickly, we're just wrapping up here. What do you think about this election coming up here? It looks like it's going to be Clinton and Bush. Bush has already received the nomination just about. What are your thoughts? Do you think Bill Clinton has a chance to beat him?
Well, I think if Bill Clinton takes and and uses his cough drops, that maybe his voice will be heard in Washington, but that's probably the only way you're going to hear it. I don't think anybody would elect Bill Clinton. He just has there's too many doubts about the man. He doesn't have a good track record all the way through. As bad as George Bush is, at least you know what you have, and it's not as bad as what it could possibly be, I guess. So you probably would see Bush, in my opinion, for another 4 years.
I don't think, I'm not impressed with any of them that are running. And I don't think any of them are going to be able to change very much. I don't know what it will take to change things. I know that, we work very hard and have a tremendous amount of money taken out, supposedly to help everything. And it just seems like our country just gets in bigger debt year after year after year. The state, the same way. I don't know. In order to get my votes, somebody would have to really start putting more money into education. And they aren't. Nobody seems to care about that right now. It doesn't seem to be as big a political thing as it should. And that's really where that's where your future is in a country.
It's where you learn.